How can this be possible? Duan Ling Tian was shocked to the point his eyes stared wide open, and the origin energy in his hands swiftly increased at the same time to increase to the limit in the blink of an eye. But even then, the exquisite jade box remained unmoving and was utterly impossible to open. Along with strands of azure energy, violet energy, and earthen yellow energy roiled within the origin energy in Duan Ling Tian's hand, he tried to open the jade box, yet it still didn't move in the slightest. This. Duan Ling Tian was shocked in his heart as the origin energy and concept on his hands dispersed, and his face was covered with an expression of astonishment. When had he seen such a bizarre jade box? No wonder the message left behind by father said that. So it turns out that he knew for certain that I'm currently unable to open the exquisite jade box. At this moment, Duan Ling Tian had completely come to realize the truth. Earlier, he was unconvinced when he heard his father speak like that, and he felt that opening a tiny jade box was as easy as flipping his hand to him. But now it would seem that even if he exerted his entire strength and utilized the quasi-royal grade spirit sword, he might not be able to open this jade box. I must find a time to try with the quasi-royal grade spirit sword. Duan Ling Tian, who caught his breath, put away the exquisite jade box with a raise of his hand. Little Tian, what's wrong? Right at this moment, Nai Rong and Nai Yuan looked at Duan Ling Tian at the same time as they'd noticed the energy of heaven and earth that had accumulated above Duan Ling Tian earlier, yet hadn't condensed into form, and they realized that Duan Ling Tian had accumulated strength earlier. It's nothing. Duan Ling Tian lightly shook his head and casually made up an excuse. I just have some comprehension in my cultivation. Nai Rong and Nai Yuan didn't doubt Duan Ling Tian's words, and Nai Yuan even couldn't refrain from sighing. No wonder you have this cultivation at such a young age, little Tian. You indeed possess exceptional natural talent that's difficult for ordinary people to reach on the path of cultivating in the martial Dao. Nai Rong nodded and indicated his agreement. Uncle Nai, you're too kind. Duan Ling Tian smiled modestly. 10 days later, Duan Ling Tian and Nai Yuan stopped in midair because Nai Rong had stopped before them. At this moment, Nai Rong's gaze descended onto an enormous mountain in the distance. That place is Flying Rainbow Mountain, and it's the location of the Flying Rainbow sect. Duan Ling Tian's brows raised when he heard this, and he couldn't help but raise his head to look over concentratedly. The distant enormous mountain was like an enormous beast lying there. The peak of the mountain was twined with clouds and mist, and numerous extremely clear multicolored rays of light could be seen through the intense sunlight. The multicolored rays of light turned and coiled within the clouds and mist, and it seemed like numerous warped rainbows converged together and gave others visual pleasure. A so-called feast for the eyes is nothing more than this. Duan Ling Tian sighed in his heart. Even though the Flying Rainbow Sect's mountain was inferior to the 7 great sword peaks of the 7-star sword sect or the demonic Lotus Blade Gorge of the former demonic Lotus Blade sect, the Flying Rainbow sect was only a second-rate sect of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, and possessing a location like this could already be considered to be not bad. This is the Flying Rainbow Mountain? I heard Mother mention it when I was young. The peak of the Flying Rainbow Mountain is like the realm of immortals in the legends, and once I grew up, I always thought Mother had spoke about it casually. I never imagined that it's really like this. Na Yuan sighed with admiration. Uncle Nai, you've never come to this Flying Rainbow sect. Duan Ling Tian was stunned. As far as he was concerned, Na Yuan was the son of the Flying Rainbow sect's leader no matter what, and even if some of the old fellows of the Flying Rainbow sect were against Na Yuan's mother, it wouldn't be to the extent of restricting Na Yuan's entrance to the Flying Rainbow sect, right? For the sake of allowing me to not be disturbed by the members of the Flying Rainbow sect, Mother never brought me to the Flying Rainbow sect, and the Flying Rainbow sect doesn't know of my existence, said Na Yuan. Duan Ling Tian came to a sudden understanding. Not far away to the north of the Flying Rainbow Mountain is one of the bases of the Azure Forest Tri-sect, the demonic Lotus Blade Gorge. Nai Rong said to Duan Ling Tian, supposedly, the Flying Rainbow sect had a deep relationship with the former demonic Lotus Blade sect. It was even to the extent that the reason the Flying Rainbow sect was capable of occupying such a superb location was because of the protection of the demonic Lotus Blade sect. Demonic Lotus Blade sect. Duan Ling Tian's gaze flashed. Actually, when Nai Rong pointed towards that enormous mountain in the distance and said it was the Flying Rainbow sect's base, the Flying Rainbow Mountain, he was already slightly surprised. He was surprised that the Flying Rainbow sect and the former demonic Lotus Blade sect were located so closely. He was surprised that a mere second-rate sect like the Flying Rainbow sect actually possessed a location like this. Demonic Lotus Blade sect. The corners of Duan Ling Tian's mouth had suddenly curled into a wisp of disdain. Of course, Nai Rong and Nai Yuan didn't notice this. Let's go over. Duan Ling Tian called out to Nai Rong and Nai Yuan before flying over towards the Flying Rainbow Mountain. He didn't intentionally speed up and allowed both Nai Rong and Nai Yuan to follow closely behind him. After a short moment, the three of them arrived outside Flying Rainbow Mountain. Once they approached nearby, Duan Ling Tian was able to notice that there were numerous mountain pathways that coiled around Flying Rainbow Mountain, whereas, every single mountain path possessed a vast platform on the mountainside. These platforms mostly had some buildings constructed on them, a few of them had a variety of plants planted on them, and there was even one that was extremely empty, yet it was the most bustling of all. The latter was obviously the Flying Rainbow sect's martial practice ground. Little Tian. When he saw Duan Ling Tian's figure flashing and intending to fly out and trespass into the Flying Rainbow sect, Nai Rong become anxious. Grandpa Nai. After he was called out to by Nai Rong, Duan Ling Tian stopped and looked at Nai Rong with a puzzled expression. You haven't notified the members of your sect. It's not too late for us to enter the Flying Rainbow sect and take my wife after you call over some people from your section. Nai Rong said, besides that, remember to ask the people you called over to not expose their identities. Otherwise, those old fellows of the Flying Rainbow sect will surely disclose it to the Azure Forest Tri-sect. Once that happens, the matter will become complicated. If you and the people you call over to help don't expose your identities, then this matter would only be an internal affair of the Flying Rainbow sect, and it would be impossible for those old fellows of the Flying Rainbow sect to ask for help from the Azure Forest Tri-sect. Nai Rong finished speaking with a single breath and spoke of his worries. Help. Nai Rong's words caused Duan Ling Tian to be unable to help but be stunned, and then he shook his head. Grandpa Nai, I don't intend to bring any people to help. What a joke. If he had to look for people to help just for the sake of taking someone from a second-rate sect in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, then he could simply just kill himself. With his current strength, not to mention a second-rate sect in the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom, he wasn't even the slightest bit afraid of the imperial family of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. He doesn't intend to get help? Nai Rong and Nai Yuan were dumbstruck when they heard Duan Ling Tian. After a short moment, Nai Rong was the first to react, and he said hurriedly, Little Tian, don't joke with Grandpa Nai at a time like this. If we trespass forcefully into the Flying Rainbow sect, it would violate a great taboo of the Flying Rainbow sect. I'm afraid not only are just the three of us unable to save my wife, we'll fall deep into it as well. He could go take a risk, yet he didn't hope that his own son and Duan Ling Tian, who wasn't related to this matter, to take a risk. Joke. Duan Ling Tian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. In the end, he couldn't be bothered to continue explaining, and he flashed out to directly descend to the sky above the extremely vast martial practice grounds on the mountainside of the Flying Rainbow Mountain. Whoosh! Duan Ling Tian's appearance from midair drew that attention of every single Flying Rainbow sect disciple on the martial practice ground. All these Flying Rainbow sect disciples were female disciples. There were both beautiful and ugly disciples, yet one thing could be confirmed: their natural talent in the martial Dao wasn't bad. Otherwise, it would be impossible for them to be accepted into the Flying Rainbow sect. Who's that? It seems to be a man. He's coming closer and closer. Wow! He's so handsome. Sword-shaped brows and starry eyes, handsome and extraordinary, and with a graceful bearing. Good gracious! He's simply the perfect lover in my dreams. You little SLT, stop being HRNY. How could such an extraordinary figure take a fancy to you? He looks to be around 25, yet is actually capable of flying. This represents that he's an expert at the void prying stage or above. Does our Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom possess such an extraordinary young genius? If you didn't say it, I almost forgot that he flew over. His natural talent is simply even more outstanding than the 5 great young masters of our Azure Forest Imperial Kingdoms who possess the most extraordinary talent in the younger generation. 5 great young masters. The most extraordinary talent in the younger generation of the Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. You couldn't have forgotten, right? All those years ago, a figure that's even more outstanding than the 5 great young masters appeared in our Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom. Not only that, during the genius competition over 2 years ago, there was supposedly another young genius that wasn't inferior to the 5 great young masters. Right? How could I have forgotten Duan Ling Tian and the mysterious young man, Su Li, that advanced in the genius competition of our Azure Forest Imperial Kingdom over 2 years ago? Even Duan Ling Tian and Su Li are probably far inferior to him, right? When Duan Ling Tian had just arrived at the martial practice grounds of the Flying Rainbow sect, he'd heard a wave of bubbling discussions. As he looked at the group of Flying Rainbow sect's female disciples that whispered to each other, there were some that even cast flirtatious looks at him, causing him to be unable to help but be slightly embarrassed. As the saying went, 3 women can make a movie. With so many women gathered together, he felt his ears were on the verge of exploding. Swoosh! Swoosh! Meanwhile, Nai Rong and Nai Yuan followed over to stand on both sides of Duan Ling Tian. Eh? Isn't he the husband of the sect leader? Suddenly, someone stared at Nai Rong and cried out in astonishment. The sect leader's husband? That guest that stayed in our Flying Cloud Pavilion earlier. Didn't he leave our Flying Rainbow sect because the Supreme Elder put pressure on the sect leader? Why has he returned? These 2 people by his side wouldn't be the help he called over, right? Many Flying Rainbow sect disciples whispered in discussion. I heard that besides asking the sect leader to step down, the Supreme Elder even asked the sect leader to enter the forbidden area and cultivate silently, and be completely cut off from the outside world. Looks like the sect leader's husband has brought help over to take the sect leader away. A few older Flying Rainbow sect disciples hurriedly turned around and left. Obviously, they went to inform the higher UPS of the sect.